Sal put down the phone, his gaze fixed blankly before him. After all this time hiding out, he'd been found. He unwrapped a stick of gum and popped it in his mouth as he looked around his little business. Fox Hollow Pawn Shop. He'd been so happy running it these past years. Though business was slow, it was also steady. Plus, he had plenty of money stashed away to help supplement his meager income. It was that supplemental cash that they were coming for. And from what Eddie had said on the phone, they'd take a pound or two of Sal's flesh along with it. In Fox Hollow, he was known as Sal Graham. Funny little guy with a big city accent. His real name was Tony DeLuca, and he'd spent decades cooking the books for a criminal syndicate. Opportunity had presented itself years earlier, and he'd stolen several $1,000,000 and disappeared. After the theft, he'd driven randomly around the country for weeks with no set destination. When he passed the Fox Hollow city limit sign, he knew he'd found his new home. Sal strolled around the shop, looking at the things on display, the jewelry, watches, power tools, cameras. He stopped before the musical instruments. He'd always loved music. In elementary school and junior high, he'd played the trumpet in the band. He played it badly. Still, it made him happy, sometimes ecstatic. He'd stopped playing in high school when he'd buddied up with the wrong crowd and started his life of crime. Sal strummed the strings of a guitar, one of 5 on display. There were also 3 saxophones, a clarinet, and 2 drum kits. The closest thing he had to a trumpet was the Joshua horn. Several weeks earlier, Isaac Klein, a teacher at the community college in the next town over, had brought it in. Centuries of tarnish gave the horn a green, mottled appearance. It looked like it was made of bronze, the bell a little larger than a modern trumpet, and twice as long. The pipes bent, twisted, and intersected in odd ways. Its value, Sal could tell, was in its age. "How old?" Sal had asked Klein. Klein answered, "According to my family, the Joshua horn is thousands of years old." Sal blinked. "Thousands?" "There's a family history, all superstitious nonsense." Klein had rattled it off as if running down a shopping list. "I was raised to believe that our family history starts with Joshua and—" Wait a minute. "Joshua? Horn?" Sal asked. "Are you saying this is the horn Joshua blew to bring down the walls of Jericho?" Klein rolled his eyes. "All nonsense, right? But here's the story, what my family believed. Joshua first showed up in the Bible as Moses' second in command. When Moses died, leadership of the—" Klein paused to make air quotation marks. "Chosen. Fell to Joshua, my great, well, I could keep that up all day. Joshua had this dream where God told him to return to Mount Sinai, where Moses received the 10 Commandments. He climbed Mount Sinai and came back down with that." He pointed at the horn. "He said that God told him to only blow it twice. The first time to blow it at the walls of Jericho to bring them down." "And the second time?" Sal had asked. "It hasn't been played since." Klein paused, a twinkle in his eyes like he was about to share the punchline of a joke. "Supposedly, God told Joshua that a second blast of the horn to the sky would usher in Armageddon." "Uh-huh." Sal bent down to scrutinize the horn and said, "I take it you're not a believer." "I teach science. I don't believe in fairy tales, but I do know it's old and it is valuable." Sal liked the horn and had bought it, paying too much but not caring. Opening the display case, Sal picked up the Joshua horn. Glancing up at the clocks on the wall behind the counter, he knew Eddie would get there soon with some of the boys. No time to pack, no time to run. Sal thought back on his life, how his happiest times had been running the shop, and as a child, specifically when he was a band geek. Almost without thought, Sal lifted the horn to his lips, shifted his chewing gum to a cheek, and gave the horn a slight puff of air. The sound was as if thousands of horns blasted at once, deep and guttural. Spikes of pain pierced his ears, and he dropped the horn. Every glass display case shattered and sent shards flying. Sal felt stings as several pieces sliced him. The building shook, building to earthquake strength, accompanied by a deafening rumble. Items fell from the wall, shelves toppled, and Sal had to hug a counter to keep from falling. A sound like fabric ripping so loud as to be felt drew Sal's attention up. The ceiling cracked open from one wall to the other. The split widened. Instead of opening onto the attic storage room above the building, Sal saw blackness in the wide crack, darker than he'd ever seen. There was movement within the black gash, and an eye as big as the room appeared in the fissure. Fiery red and cat-like, the eye blinked and withdrew. Movement flickered at the edges of the crack, and tentacle-like appendages appeared, first a few and then more. Like a blind man tapping a cane, the tentacles felt around the crack in the ceiling. When they touched the walls, they began to work their way down into the shop. Running for the door, Sal dodged the dangling alien limbs. Exiting the building, he was greeted by the beautiful summer day. Breathing hard, he shut the door and backed away from the shop. The darkness he'd seen in the crack now darkened the shop's windows. One tentacle the size of an SUV brushed against the glass door and then retreated into the dark. "What was it Klein told me?" Sal mumbled to himself. "God told Joshua that the second blast of the horn to the sky would usher in Armageddon. So apparently, if that second blast of the horn is indoors, Armageddon will be contained indoors? Huh, how about that?" Turning, Sal closed his eyes and breathed in fresh air while listening to a distant bird. The hum of tires joined the bird song. Sal opened his eyes to a black Lincoln town car as it pulled to the curb. The doors opened and 3 old colleagues got out. "How you doing, Tony? Oh, wait, it's Sal now, right?" Eddie asked. A small man in a tailored suit, he smiled in a way that made Sal's skin crawl. "You remember the boys, Nick and Georgie?" he said, indicating the 2 enforcers behind him. Looking around, Eddie said, "So you've been hiding out here in Hickville all these years, eh?" Sal cleared his throat. "I suppose we have things to, discuss?" "That we do," Eddie said. "That we do." "Let's get it over with." Sal walked to the door, opened it, stood aside, and said, "After you." Eddie stopped at the threshold to pat Sal's cheek and then entered, followed by Nick and Georgie. Sal remained outside and shut the door, using his key to lock it. From inside, Eddie shouted, "What's going on here? Somebody get the lights!" A second later, there were screams, then gunshots, and then silence. Sal took a piece of scrap paper and a pen from his pocket and scribbled, "Closed for renovations." Taking the wad of gum from his mouth, he used it to stick the handwritten sign to the door. As he walked away, Sal whistled a tune, something they used to play in junior high band. Looking around, he stopped whistling long enough to say, "It's certainly a beautiful day here in Fox Hollow."